are buried in Benchwork in today's video. That was dumb. Let's not do that one again. Hey everybody, today is the day I finally got this room ready. As you can see, walls are painted. Ooh, very nice, very nice, very nice. And I'm ready to start building benchwork in this room. Before I get in doing that, I want to let you guys know right up front, I am not a professional. I'm not a carpenter. I don't build benchwork for a living. I'm an artist and kind of terrible with tools. So I have built four layouts in the past. So this will be my fifth time around building benchwork for a layout. So I've got techniques that I've picked up over the years that I like, that work well for me. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to do it that way. You'll see other people on the internet doing it different ways. You'll see people doing it similar ways to how I'm doing it. So basically take what I'm doing here with a grain of salt. I'm not going to hide anything from you where I screw up. I will show you the screw ups so you can kind of learn from that. But I'm just a guy with some wood and some screws and building benchwork in my basement. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about where to start. You got to start somewhere, right? I am choosing this portion of the layout, and I'll flash the track plan up on the screen. This portion of the layout is the trickiest part of the layout to get right. And so I'm going to start there. We have in this area here by the door, I need to put in a swing gate, right? So I have to get that in there, and everything has to line up perfectly because the track has to line up perfectly every single time. It's a very precise piece of construction, a very precise problem that we're going to have to deal with. And so I am, that's one reason to start on this side of the room. We also have along this wall kind of a big, deep, well not deep, but tall kind of a scenery scene with this river that descends very low below the track work. And then behind it we have the beginning of my staging tracks. I have to fit 3 staging tracks along this pretty narrow wall before they have to curve around the corner and head 90 degrees the other direction. I've got 30-inch radiuses I have to make sure I can squeeze in here. So this whole section of the railroad is the most complex piece of the railroad. And I want to build this section first because I want to get this part right, knowing that the rest of the railroad will just kind of flow out from this section. Wherever the track kind of ends up, lands, and how wide and deep the benchwork is in this area is a necessity, and then everything else will kind of work well off of that. I don't want to build that side of the room, working my way over this direction, only to find I've sort of like backed myself into a corner, and it's difficult for me to make the stuff that I have to have happen to benchwork on this side of the room work when I've already made decisions on that side of how the whole benchwork needs to be. Does that make any sense? I feel like I'm not making a lot of sense right now. Anyway, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the swing gate. I got to get that 100% perfect. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. We'll find out. You're going to join me on that journey. All right, see you guys in a second. All right, I am starting right here. What I'm doing is I am laying out this paper on this floor here, and I'm making myself a template to work from. This is kind of an awkward area. I have this angled wall here, and so, and I've got a lot of stuff I kind of got to get to meet in this one spot and make work right. So I think laying it down on a piece of paper first, and I'm kind of like figuring out, what direction you want to go here before you actually get to cutting plywood and that kind of thing is a good way to go. So I know a couple of things that help me out here. I know how deep I want my benchwork to be heading this direction, which is 18 3/4 inches. And I know how big I want the swing bridge that comes off of here in front of my door to be, which I've already sort of created a template for myself. Here you can see the pencil lines. These are the center lines of the track. So I know how big that needs to be in order to fit. And I can kind of figure out from there how all this comes together. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have the swing bridge that comes out and meets up right here at this point at kind of an angle. So that when I swing out. What?
You wear sock shoes.
You're wearing them now. Kids, right? All right. So I know. Sorry about that. I know I want these to kind of come together, kind of at this point, at this angle. So I think that that's going to work really well. I thought about maybe curving this around here a little bit, but I think it's going to make things a little awkward at this point where the bridge meets the benchwork. So I'm not going to do it in this spot. But having drawn this out, I think it's going to work pretty good. It's a little simpler than I thought it was going to end up being, which is great. Simple is better. So all I got to do now at this point is cut this out and then get to work actually laying this on the plywood and using it as a template to begin to make my cuts from. This paper, by the way, is like some painter's paper or something you can get from Walmart. Here's a big roll of it for a couple bucks, $2-3, something like that. Very, very cheap. Very, very worth it. So definitely worth picking up some of this and using paper templates to kind of, sketch out your ideas, get those kind of down on paper, and get it right there before you start wasting a lot of lumber. Okay, so I am about halfway through the process here, and I've built these two large boxes that are odd shaped. I mean, these walls were this was difficult for me to I only have a circular saw. I've got no really good way to measure angles. I kind of had to eyeball it and guess. It worked out in the end, but these aren't the prettiest things to look at for sure. These are incredibly overbuilt with tons of cross bracing, and it's just it's way more than it needs to be, which is typical for model railroading benchwork. For some reason, we feel like we have to overbuild in model railroading, I guess, to protect the engines and the cars. You don't want your benchwork to fall in on itself. But honestly, like, the heaviest thing that benchwork is going to hold up is going to be the benchwork itself. So although I'm not going to be building like this for the rest of the layout, these two sections here make sense because I don't want these portions of the layout to twist or bend at all or warp over time, because that bridge has to swing and lock into place in the exact same spot every time. So that's why I overbuilt these two pieces right here. I also am using Poly Shades by Minwax, which is this stuff right here. This is a espresso color. It is a stain and polyurethane in one. If you're making really nice furniture, that's probably not what you want. I'm not. I'm using the stain is really for the section of the bridge, the swing bridge, that's going to be visible. This is going to be, this is under the benchwork. This will be covered in fascia, so you won't be seeing this necessarily. But the polyurethane will help seal it and hopefully keep any moisture from warping it in the future. That's the hope there. So this isn't looking too pretty right now, but I'm going to put a few more layers of stain on, and it should darken it nicely and look hopefully pretty good in the end. But like I said, most of it's going to be covered up anyway. We're not going to be seeing a lot of this in the end. At the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, I'm overdoing it probably, but I don't want to find myself down the road having issues with derailments simply because it's just warped just a little bit. So I think that this will, although it's way overblown, I think it'll get the job done. All right, well, on to the next step right now. Okay, so none of these angles are, I was hoping the angles would be at 45 degrees, which would be great because I've got one of these guys, which would make everything very simple. It's not simple. These walls don't angle at 45 degrees. They angle at more like 49 degrees. So what I got to do is I got to get it close as I can with one of these puppies. And then to get those really fine flush connections between, the boxes and the bridge, I gotta sand the rest of it, kind of sand those other few degrees into what is this piece right here, which is my bridge. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing a lot of sanding. I'm going slow. I don't want to cut it too short. I'd rather cut it a little long and then sand it to get it nice and straight. And so that's what I'm doing now. One other thing, like kids, these guys, safety glasses, so important. I used to not wear safety glasses, and it's a mistake. These are a few dollars, like $5, maybe $8 for these. Get yourself a nice pair because they're gonna be more comfortable. But I mean, at $8, this is like the cheapest thing you're gonna buy in model railroading. And I'm telling you, the first time you get a splinter shoot up in your eye from a circular saw, or you get a bunch of sawdust in your eye from one of these guys, you're gonna wish you had a pair of safety glasses. And I need my eyes to make a living so that I can buy more trains. So I mean, it seems like a little thing, but you know, do it. And it's finished. Let's take a look at how it works. Just like that. It took forever to finish. I made a lot of mistakes along the way and learned a lot, but it's done. Like I said before, like this angled wall here is not 45 degrees, so like everything was just kind of off a little bit, so it took a whole lot of sanding to get right. If I was smart, I would have assembled the whole thing together, sanded it, got it everything perfect, and then went back and applied the stain and polyurethane finish. Instead, I kind of assembled in pieces and stained it, and doing so meant that I had to do a lot of sanding and then restaining, and then that wasn't quite right, so sand and restain. That wasn't quite right. Sand and you get it. Tricky. And figuring out the locking mechanism for this was a little tricky too. I had originally planned to use one of these guys, which is a let's see if you can see this here. It's an adjustable latch, and you know, you kind of like pull it close. And the idea was it was going to bring these two together and lock them firmly in place with no movement. The problem is, it basically what it did was it would lock it kind of like out of place, like in a weird like kink. Not the way I was expecting it to do it at all. And then also like this thing would not stay like in one position, which means I would have to like screw it in every single time to the right position before I tried to lock. And that didn't work. So I went back into the old-fashioned kind of you know, the little door latch thing. And that actually holds it in place perfectly. No side-to-side movement at all. It's amazing how simple that worked out. I kind of was expecting a little bit of movement, but no, I'm not getting any of that. So that's perfect. Let's get the camera a little bit closer and take a look at some of the features of this swing gate, and I'll show you just how I built it. Okay, I'm not sure how well this is going to show up. This is a lot of glossy black wood, but I have a little piece of wood that kind of sticks out of here, and that fits into a notch I've created in this piece of wood here, so that when I slide this gate shut, it just fits right in place. What that does is it keeps any sag from happening on this end of the bridge, so that as I lay the track across, it's going to lay across nice and smooth and not have any problems there. I also use some pretty heavy duty door hinges. These hinges will keep this side from sagging and hopefully hold up pretty well over time as well. But once locked into place, this creates for a pretty darn sturdy end on this side. Let's take a look at the other side. Alright, and on this side you can see the other end of the swing bridge. I have this piece of wood that sticks out on this side, which supports the piece of wood as I bring it into place, and then a simple sort of door, sort of sliding latch system there locks it in place. No side-to-side movement at all. A
slight bit of up and down movement right on this end right here because there's not a lot of support right here. This once I'm going to put a fascia across the front here to match the rest of the layout. So that's why it's kind of drippy and gross. It doesn't really matter what this looks like. But once I put the fascia across the top, I may add a little more support here on this side. That won't be difficult at all to add, but you can see just how simple that door is to operate, and really does a really good job of keeping it locked in place. Okay, so now it's on to bench work. I know I said I was going to start over in this area over here with the kind of complex bench work that involves deep river basins and staging that runs behind backdrops. But I want to make sure I've got my technique right before I start with that. And I thought this was a good opportunity to show people who might be new at building model railroad benchwork some basic techniques for building the benchwork that'll save you a lot of time and heartbreak. So this is an area of the layout. It's just an interchange yard. It's nice and flat, so I can use some pretty basic benchwork in this area. And that's what we'll be doing today. I am using 1x3 boards. And these are just about perfect. 1x4s are a little too large, I think. 2x4s are way overdoing it. 1x2s, a little small, a little unwieldy. 1x3s seem to be perfect for me. And that's what the majority of this benchwork is going to be built out of. As far as tools go, get yourself a cordless drill. And what I just got this thing. This is like a little speed, I don't know, like speed chuck or something. Essentially, you can very quickly switch between a drill or screw. Just simply pop that out, pop that in. I just got this. I've been building model railroad benchwork for years with that one. Pain in the butt. So being able to swap back and forth between the two very quickly, worth it. Pick one up. As far as connecting everything together, I am using drywall screws. I'm using number 6 1 5/8 drywall screws, so not super long. You don't need to be very, very long, just long enough to kind of hold the pieces together. And then get yourself some wood glue as well. Alrighty, so let's see. What I've done is I've measured the wall, and I have determined that I measured the studs in the wall, and I've determined the studs are 16 inches apart. Check to make sure that that is the case in your walls. They're supposed to be 16 inches in most walls. Some people go as wide as 24 inches. So just check to make sure that your stud spacing is correct. This isn't necessary if you're going to be building legs for your layout, but because I'm attaching mine directly to the wall, I want to make sure that all of my spacing in my benchwork matches the stud spacing in the wall, so that when I attach these brackets right there, I can attach them to these cross braces just like that. All right, so simply take screw it into the board. Seems pretty simple, right? A couple of quick tips if you're new to this. Drill yourself a pilot hole first. And I know it takes just a little bit more time to do, and you're thinking, well, why would I need to do that? I can just screw right into the board. These screws will split the board, okay? And you don't want to do that, because when you split a board, you're ruining its structural integrity. It's not going to hold very well. So just take the extra time, drill in a pilot hole. I'm using a 3/32 inch drill bit. It's smaller than the diameter of the screw. Make sure you do that. That way you have plenty of wood left for the screw to kind of lock itself into. So let's go ahead and drill a couple of holes. I've already pre-measured everything, so I'm just going to make sure everything lines up nicely. Don't have to go super far in, just far enough to kind of clear most of that screw. This is where having that quick lock thing is really nice, because then you can pop that in there, and then you can begin to screw in. Now, one thing, I don't think that this is absolutely necessary, but I do like to add a little bit of wood glue in these sections here, just to hold them even more in place. Keeps everything from kind of wiggling, if that makes sense. You know, screws can kind of sometimes loosen up a little bit over time, and the wood glue just helps to kind of keep everything together a little bit better. You don't need a lot, just a little bit, just a little bead. Come on. This is almost empty, so it is not. There we go. Okay. And then it's the only bad thing about wood glue is it does tend to make things a little bit more messy. And that is it. Just take a look at it real quick, make sure everything's kind of lining up well enough. And if there's any glue that kind of squirts out of it, kind of wipe that up a little bit so you're not sticking to your tabletop. And you're done with that one, and you're ready to move on to the next. Pretty simple, but what you're going to get is you're going to get really solid construction. And here we are. The open grid benchwork is in place and it's looking pretty good. This is a pretty simple area on my model railroad, so the benchwork is going to stay nice and simple here. But I already got the plywood laid down in the areas where I'm going to be running track, and started to put these wood strips up on the walls where I'm going to eventually glue my hardboard backdrop too. So just getting kind of everything up in place, and it's looking good and coming together pretty quickly overall. I want to show you something. Right over here I have measured wrong, and the box that makes up my swing gate is a ½ inch longer than the benchwork itself, and so there's just like a little overhang here. Not an issue in the long run. I can fix that and basically shim this up with a ½ inch piece of plywood here, lay a strip of fascia over top of everything, and you're not even going to see that. And so I want to show you that to point out to you that everyone makes mistakes, and benchwork doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to hold up the model railroad, and you can kind of work around some of these mistakes and hide them. I think somebody said like a great carpenter is one who knows how to hide their mistakes. I'm not a great carpenter, but I know how to hide my mistakes. So that, once we get the fascia across the front, you won't even know that is like that. And yeah, so I'm really happy with how this part of the layout's turning out. It's coming together very, very well, and I'm really excited to get going with the rest of it. So that'll be it for this video. Thanks everyone for stopping by this week. It's a longer one, but I got a lot of work done this month, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. This will be part 1. I'll have 1 or 2 more videos coming out after this as I build out the rest of the layout in the rest of the room. So thanks for stopping by. Link, subscribe, bell icon, you know, all that stuff. And I will see everyone next month.
Coming home, baby.